Ivyar. Ivyar. Let's talk about the tragedy of the Ivyar character. This was a very quick read of a chapter, but it definitely is going to leave an impact. And I think this character is going to be one that is discussed and talked about for a long time. He might not be as complex as somebody like Askeladd was, or as entertaining as somebody like, Thorkel or Garm, but he has a very interesting arc that ultimately ends in this chapter. And I knew that we were going to get deaths of characters. We are in the climax. We are in the finale of not just the arc, but the entire series. So I had my handful of predictions of characters that were going to die. Ivyar, I was always a little bit on the fence with, because Yukimura could have went in a number of different ways with his character, but death was always certainly an option, right? And it seems as though we get that in this chapter. I mean, no one's there checking his pulse at the very end to confirm it, but I think that we can pretty much come to the conclusion that this chapter was meant to be his finale. So let's talk about it. We're going to get into a little bit of a summary here with this chapter 214. And the beginning of the chapter, let me go back a little bit here. The beginning of the chapter is pretty much showing the hopelessness of the situation. We don't really get many of our, we don't get Thorfinn, we don't get Hild. We still haven't seen what's become of that situation, because I do believe Hild was on her way back to the fort, so we haven't seen her re-enter. Thorfinn is still out of commission. Very interesting writing choice to have your final climax not include the main character. Bold. I don't know if that'll change, but I'm kind of into it in a strange way, from just like a writing standpoint of something very unique that you don't see very often. But yeah, the hopelessness is rising quite heavily here, because you have the Lanu flanking them from behind, coming through on the canoes, and then you get all this creativity of them attacking the front of the fortress with starting the fires. And I love this sort of like makeshift grappling hook with the log here. I don't know if there's an actual term for that or if it was an actual thing, from history, but I like the idea of it, of them climbing the walls. And then we get a focus here on Stark and Ivyar. And I love the chapter that happened a while back now, where we really get this sort of like opening up, this like vulnerability of Ivyar, where he really states that, I didn't want, to incite conflict. I just wanted to protect those around me. He was a guy that had never really been in combat, never really been in war, didn't understand the history of Thorfinn, didn't understand what these people have went through to get to Vinland. He's the one that smuggled a sword because he thought it might come in handy. That's not meant to be a pun, but you could take it that way. And when he saw Thorfinn was about to be attacked, he drew the sword and chopped off the hand of the shaman. And from his perspective, he was always doing what he believed was right. He was misguided, and he was naive, and he was overly ambitious when it comes to this. But Ivyar was never presented as an evil character. He was never presented as a villain. And as time went on, you really saw that Stark was a little bit more of the brains of the operation, and he was the one that kind of wanted to put Ivyar in charge. And he, it's like the three brothers, they always really believed in one another. And you get that here, like really prominently stated in this chapter as well, in how much they care about each other and how much they really do believe in one another. Because as the canoes are coming in, Einar and everybody has to go hold them off, has to fight them at bay, because they're literally, inside the fortress now. Like, there's no other choice. There's no time to talk. There's no time to think about it. They're there. They're coming in with spears. They have to fight, It's like the time for talking is past at this point, And that's the tragedy of it all also. It's like Vinland Saga is one of those series that when the stakes rise this high and the combat level is in all out war, it's like it's the one manga where it's like you don't want to see it happen, where it really showcases the tragedy of it all. And it's such a brilliant, like Yukimura is a brilliant writer, you know, and I've talked about it a million times with the nuance and how he just kind of shows things how they are. And even if he has his own ideology and messages, it's never like there are times where like it's heavy handed, but like it's usually just a display of reality. Like, here's the situation. And then you come up with what you want to feel about it. And that's exactly what happens with Ivar here. And I'm sure many people are going to have different ideas about his character. And some people are going to be happy that he died. And some people are going to be upset about it. And that's just the nature of good writing, is that everybody can come up with their own interpretation of it, right? But Ivar, even one-handed, decides that he's going to go battle the Lanu that are showing up in the canoes. It's just like, I just feel like I have to do this. I have to protect these people. I can't, you know, I can't just let this happen. I can't just sit, you know, he was kind of sitting depressed, you know, as the battle was happening, feeling useless. And now this is his opportunity to feel useful in some way. And he even props up his brother, Stark, saying, you know, hey, like, you were always the real leader, and now is your time to use those skills and that capability to do your thing. We all have to go over here. I'm useless. I'm not a good leader. The least I can do is swing this axe with my one good working arm, but you have a legitimate skill that you need to utilize right now. And it's basically him saying goodbye. You know, him telling Stark what he means to him while at the same time saying goodbye to him. In not using those actual words, talking around the real emotion that's happening here, right? So we see some panels of the battle and the combat that's happening here, and Yukimura's drawn these battle sequences a million times. You know, it's like you kind of take it for granted after we've seen so many, but when you look at the detail of like each individual, you know, puncture of the spear and where the arrows are going, and people using, like, this guy's using a stone hammer, and this guy's using a makeshift knife. Like, it's just, it's one of those things where it's like, it just feels so hopeless, you know, it just feels so hopeless. Like, they're using these crude, you know, rudimentary weapons, you know, and you're just bashing people's faces in and stabbing them with a spear. And it's just like, it's as chaotic and as barbaric as you can possibly go, right? And then you have Ivar coming in strong, swinging his axe around, and he's building himself up in his mind. Like, and to a degree, this is kind of what you would have to do if you're in this situation. Like, on a small scale, you know, if you're playing a sport or if you're in the gym, like, you gotta hype yourself up. You're like, I can do this. I'm a badass. I'm gonna succeed. Gotta push myself. You know, it's like you have to give yourself that hype up, talking motivation in order to push yourself to do it. And so while he's swinging his axe around, he's going like, I am the leader. I am the warrior. You know, all of these things. But it is all a delusion, right? But it's like you have to say these things to hype yourself up, to get you onto that level of adrenaline to be able to fight. You know, and he's like, this is what I've always wanted. I've always wanted to fight for a cause. And like, it is a delusion, right? But like, it's also not untrue. And that's the brilliant nuance of the way that Yukimura writes, is because it is true that Ivar has, this is what Ivar has wanted in a way, is that he's idealized the thought of being in war, the thought in being in a battle, in combat, fighting to protect what is valuable to him, right? It's just that constant desire, like, oh, I can't wait until I get to protect what's valuable. Instead of just appreciating the valuable things that are happening, it's like you imagine this scenario where you have to put your life on the line and defend it, right? Not that you wouldn't if that situation came up, but it's like, you know, there's this fantasy, this desire, right, to be in that situation. But the reality is that when those situations arise, there's no guarantee that you're going to come out on top and you're going to be the badass and you're going to be the John Wick of the situation and just take care of everybody. You know, it's like, this is the fantasy coming to life, soon to be forced with the reality. And that's what happens. And he gets stabbed multiple times very early on with a bunch of spears. And you know, you see in this page, there's like the juxtaposition between the two ideas of what brings fulfillment, right? It's like you have Ivar, you know, going down, adrenaline fueled, fighting to protect something. But then you have the flash of, you know, his two comrades, his two brothers, just enjoying themselves, just living life. And it's like, that's, he only just got to experience it recently, and now it's all gone for so many different complex reasons, but gone nonetheless. And the next page also, you know, feeding into the delusion, where he says the iconic lines of the entire series is, "I am a true warrior," which, and then it's like immediately followed up by just like the patheticness of just, you're just getting stabbed and you're just dying and you're just bleeding out and no one's going to remember you. You know, maybe Stark, but it's just, it is a tragedy. And then he just falls lifeless. And then his weapon gets taken and the battle continues around him. And he's just dead. It's interesting also that they use the term true warrior, because it's not as if one can declare themselves a true warrior. And that's why it's feeding into his fantasy, feeding into his delusion. You know, it's like, to be called a true warrior, the reason that that term has such magnificent impact in this story is because, you know, that's what took so long for Hild to forgive Thorfinn and then kind of like bestow that upon him. Like, I've seen your struggle, I've seen your sacrifice, I've seen you endure, I've seen you persevere, I've seen you follow your dreams. You are a true warrior. And it's something that is given to you. But if you just say that you're a true warrior, it just is delusion. You know, it's like you can't declare that. You have to be seen as that. But that's how he goes out. But then on the flip side, if you view this in a different way, you could say that although it is delusional, Ivar does die on his own terms. He dies propping up Stark. He dies defending his group, his people, his colony, which he is. He is actually doing that to a degree, you know. And he dies fighting, you know, which is the kind of fantasy that he's always had. So yes, it is meaningless, and yes, it is delusional, but it is also showing somebody going out on their own terms, which from a certain point of view is also respectable. And I know that's going to be very conflicting, you know, for fans of the series, but that's, I think the brilliance of it is because that is life. Life is not black and white. It's not easy to define. It's all of these things together. It's complicated. And that's why we're in this battle to begin with, because it's fucking complicated. Wonderful. It's just wonderful. It's just wonderful. It's sad. It's tragic. It's poignant. And it's real. And that's why I think Yukimura is a brilliant writer. The chapter ends by seeing some more death and destruction. You know, some really good gore art is on display here. And then we get the return of this guy. I always forget his name. But he was a former Jomsviking that Thorfinn saved his life from being executed, brought him over to Vinland, and he's been incredibly grateful ever since, basically turned his entire life around. So, you know, he would be a force to be reckoned with. We've never seen him fight, but we know because of reputation that he would be a good fighter. He's obviously drawn as like a big, strong-looking dude. So, you know, this guy might actually wreak some havoc that we never would have expected. So he is on his way, and I think this is going to be the second win. With Stark in command and this guy coming back, this is going to be the second win of the Norsemen, and we might see the tables start to turn here for our characters. Obviously, it's all still tragedy, but you know, we might see a lot of the Lanu get taken down in the next chapter. So yes, I thought this was great. You know, there's obviously a lot of missed opportunity with not having more Ivar and Thorfinn interaction or to expand on that. But I think that, again, that's part of what I like about it, is because it's just that sense of realism. It's like you don't always get that closure. You don't always get that catharsis. You don't always get what you want in life. You know, it usually falls apart in a way that you don't expect, such as everything that's happening. So I kind of like it that way. Anyways, guys, if you've read Vinland Saga Chapter 214, let me know what you think about it down below. Leave all your thoughts, theories, opinions, and talk about Ivar. All right, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up, like, and a comment if you enjoyed it. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time.